I do genuinely think the game is in a brilliant place, and I think gearing is in the correct place as well. I wouldn't like to slow down gearing. I think the way we get gear at the moment, I mean, it's quick. It's super quick. I don't think I've ever got gear this fast ever, right? I think that, you know, the community prefers it that way. I think I prefer it that way. Overall, and I think people prefer it to be a bit easier in that sense as well, right? There's always going to be super hard stuff. You can do Mythic Plus keys up to infinity, right? So it's always going to be as hard as you can possibly manage. Mythic Raid is fucking hard, right? So there's always going to be that top level content. My complaint about the difficulty is so specific, but I do think it's a thing that people recognize. I do think that guilds that were ahead of the curve guilds, and that was their thing. We're not the only guild that I've heard complain that Heroic Raid is getting too easy to be like fit for purpose for us specifically and what we were doing, you know, and why we played Heroic, right? So it's an incredibly specific complaint that I've got. It's not one that I would expect anyone who's not in my situation to relate to, and I'm certainly not suggesting we change the game in any major way to accommodate that very, very specific complaint. I don't know what the answer is, honestly. I would like Heroic put on a personal level to be a bit harder, personally. I'd like the fights to be a bit harder to make up for the fact that there is so much gear now. Maybe we're just absolute pumpers. Well, I think we are better at the game than we used to be, but I think the overall consensus is that Heroic is getting easier, right? Need Mythic Flex. Well, you know, I'm loath to suggest yet another difficulty level, right? But maybe that's what we need at this point. And yeah, maybe the answer, instead of being like Heroic Plus, I think Mythic Flex would probably be the answer, because Mythic Flex by definition would be Mythic Minus. If you kept like the strict 20-man Mythic as well, that's always going to be superior. That's always, and I don't know, maybe the gear has like 2 extra item levels or some shit, right? I want to fight bosses that are that hard, but our raid can't do like the strict personnel requirements that are needed for Mythic. And I think the argument for having a Mythic which is just a set number, and it, you know, if you've only got 19, tough shit, dudes, and you can't take more than 20 in, I think there's a really good argument for that as the highest level of content, because I think, you know, composition is really important then. So, but I want to fight bosses that hard, but I literally just can't be a part of a proper Mythic guild like that. So yeah, I think Flex Mythic must be I think that's probably the answer. I wouldn't mind Heroic being a little bit harder. I mean, after we beat Normal, we went straight into Heroic and got the first boss down in 10 pulls. Yeah, and like we just blown straight through Heroic. Like, it hasn't even touched the fucking sides, which is not necessarily terrible or bad, but didn't used to be the case, I guess is what I'm saying. I find it interesting that 14k guilds have killed Heroic and Surek, but only 16k guilds have killed Normal and Surek. So to me, it seems like there's not really a lot of people that would switch from Normal to Heroic, even if Heroic is easier now. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Or do we need new hardness level between Heroic and Mythic? Well, that's what I think Heroic Flex would be, because Heroic Flex is going to be easier than set 20-man... Mythic Flex is going to be easier than strict Mythic, right? I mean, it just is. You make something Flex, it's easier because it gives you more variety, it gives you more options, right? So, by definition, Mythic Flex would be an easier version of Mythic without even changing any of the mechanics, you know? In fact, I'm sure by having more people or something, there would be mechanics that you could basically, like, cheat. Yeah, it would be slightly easier, yeah, for sure. And, you know, the thing that would make it would be easier just from a gameplay point of view anyway, but it would also be substantially easier in the amount of people that would be able to access it. There's 2 big reasons why people can't access Mythic. The first is that they're not good enough, but the second is that it's much harder to organize a Mythic team than it is a Heroic team because of the lack of Flex. So, you know, just by allowing Flex, it would give so many more people access to the raid at that difficulty level, and it would undoubtedly result in more like standard Mythic teams and kills as well, you know? Of course it would. Like, you get people in through the door, and they will come back and they will do the proper Mythic as well. Wouldn't having Mythic Flex be more detrimental to the world first run by making it easier, as they'll be able to farm loot from heroic and flex raids before pure Mythic? Easy answer to that. You have Mythic Flex release a month in, or you have the Mythic Flex bosses on the same lockout as the Mythic Standard bosses. So you wouldn't be able to duplicate the gear from them. Yeah, and yeah, also, on top of that, you're right, Mythic splits would be more fun than heroic splits. Yeah, even if that were the case, yeah. I suspect the best answer would be to release it a month afterwards, like, you know. I'd have thought balancing would be a nightmare for Flex. Yes, undoubtedly, you're absolutely right. It would. Of course it would. Yeah. It would, and that's the argument for having Mythic not be Flex, right? Is that you want, for the very highest level of content, and I would still count Mythic Raid as the highest level of content in the game, certainly from a PvE point of view, there is a really strong argument, which I agree with, that those fights need to be perfectly tuned with very specific things in mind, and you can only do that with a set raid size. You know, that doesn't, you can't fine tune that bespoke work, right, if it's Flex. And that's a really good argument. That's, you know, for the fights to be as tightly tuned and as good as they can possibly be at the highest level, they have to not be Flex. I absolutely get that. And I completely agree with that. I think that if things stay the way they are, and like my guild got ahead of the curve in the first month, say, if there was a Mythic Flex, I think my guild will give it a shot. Yeah, 100%. And then, I mean, it's like, do you remember when people used to say that LFR kind of stopped people going into normal raids? This was like a genuine argument, which I always fought against and I always argued against. And I think I've been proven right. Like this idea that, oh, people are getting all their gear from LFR. They have no reason to go into raid, right? And that was never true. It's especially not true now because, you know, it lets people access, like allowing people to access content at a lower level, usually in video games, emboldens them and gives them the confidence, if they enjoy it, to then go on and tackle that content at a higher level, right? I don't know if I'd have managed to have got into normal raiding and heroic raiding if I hadn't been able to test stuff on PTR and got used to it like that. LFR, and got used to it like that, you know? I think it's really important. And I think Mythic Flex would do the same, honestly. So I know what's going to happen with my guild, right? Even though we are resolved, you know, we've been talking about it on our Discord, there is a genuine desire in my guild, once we're done with heroic, because we've all decided heroic's easier than it used to be, we want to go into mythic and we want to like give it a proper shot. But I know what's going to happen. The same thing's going to happen that always happens. You know, it's just going to be so hard to keep that steady 20. It's just like such a level of difficulty on top of fights that we find difficult anyway, that, you know, you get one or two dropouts and it's all over, right? Mythic Flex would just completely negate that. What I would consider our main barrier to Mythic at the moment. Yeah. And then it would make it much easier for us to go into Mythic after that. Because we'd be like, guys, we know we can do these fights. We've just got to do it as a team of 20 now and get the cutting edge title. You know? I think it would really embolden people. I think it'd be great. Having stuff be too easy can feel bad. Yes, I do agree with that. If there are greater challenges available, then it being too easy a lot of the time pushes people to try it on harder difficulty. I completely agree. And you know, like, I think where gearing is at the moment is really good because it encourages people to take on harder content. Like, there are so many people going for 3K in Mythic Plus at the moment. There are so many people going for a 3K rating. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of this season, there have been twice as many like Mythic Plus keys done as last season. It's wild. There are so many people doing it right now because everyone wants that 3K title because you're getting a title for it now and a mount, which is awesome. And also because like you feel like, well, yeah, I'm doing my plus 10s every week. I'm getting a mythic track thing every week. I'm getting the crests to upgrade them. Like there's literally nothing holding me back from this content, really. If heroic is much harder, I'm afraid one of my 1 day a week guild can't clear it in one night. It feels great currently, but I do understand it's easy for a 2 day a week guild. Yeah, and you know what? We used to be a 3 day a week guild. And like it would have been even easier then, but yeah, like I say, I don't expect anyone else to necessarily relate to the very, very specific problem I have with heroic raiding difficulty. And I certainly don't think things should be changed just because I'm in this situation, just because my raid is in this situation. I'm sure not everyone in my raid would agree with me, honestly, but it is how I feel, yeah, for sure. But I've been doing this long enough to know that just because I feel a certain way, that doesn't I don't speak for anyone else, pretty much. But I do know there are other heroic guilds who do feel the same as us.